Right, g'day everyone. So today we're super excited to have with us Vishal Kapoor, Country Manager of Prospection Japan. Thanks, Vishal, for joining us.
Thank you, Philip, for the invitation. I'm looking forward to the
So
chat.
tell us a little bit about, your background and maybe, introduce Prospection.
Sure. So I started my career around 15 years back or so, and I've worked across the global markets, including the US, India, Singapore, Australia, and now Japan. Spent my entire career in analytics and data-driven businesses, and I've witnessed firsthand the evolution from traditional analytics to data science to machine learning and now the AI era. Along the way, I've had the opportunity to build high performing teams, scale businesses, and launch new capabilities, all with a goal of driving meaningful impact. That passion is what brought me to Prospection around 5 years back. Now I have the privilege of leading our Japan business and global analytics capabilities, where I get to connect all the amazing cutting edge innovation from the team with the unique needs of the Japanese healthcare ecosystem. Um, as you would have guessed by now, Prospection is a global healthcare technology company that uses real world patient data and AI to help pharma and healthcare organizations better understand patient treatment pathways, identify unmet needs, and ultimately help get the right patients on the right treatments at the right time.
Okay, great. So setting up shop in Japan. So I think it was we started first working, maybe I met Eric in 2018 or 2000, certainly it's before the pandemic.
That's
And
right.
we've been working with Prospection ever since. Tell us a little bit about that story. How did Prospection, why Japan? What was the story?
Absolutely. It's been an interesting 5 years or so for us in Japan. Entering into Japan happened a little by coincidence in terms of one of our biggest customers in Australia loved our work, brought us to Asia Pacific, and of course, Japan was a big focus. And through that coincidental entry into Japan, we've had the opportunity to kind of really understand Japan. And there were two strong beliefs that emerged after the first year or two of working in Japan. One was that Japan has one of the richest healthcare data sets globally. The second was a realization that if we had to drive meaningful impact here, it will require a long-term approach to how we think about driving and bringing about that change. We we've listened, worked with local experts, invested in understanding regulatory, cultural and clinical norms, how decisions get made, what the expectations of Japanese customers are. And in that process, when we entered 5 years back or so, in that process, we've now built strong local partnerships. We have a strong local team now. And more importantly, we've also had to adapt our technology and, in fact, even our delivery model to suit what Japan really needs as a market. I would sum it by saying it's been a deliberate and thoughtful journey. It's definitely taken time. It's had its share of learnings and quite accelerated learnings. But we're now proud to be collaborating with some of the largest pharma companies and data custodians in Japan and helping them apply AI to accelerate evidence-based decision making. So it's been quite a ride, Philip, and I know we were one of the first people we learned a lot from, especially around talent in Japan when we're looking to set up shop. So thank you for being one of the trusted advisors to us along.
No, very welcome. Yeah, we've loved working with Prospection. So tell us about the technology of Prospection. Let's explain it like I'm a 10-year-old, which basically my intellect is.
Sure, that's always a if you can explain it to your mom, that's always a good reference to
Right.
how good you understand that inherent technology. So I think that the simplest way to understand what we do is our specialization is claim patient level claims data. We all believe it's highly valuable. It's got so much more information about a patient lens to healthcare rather than perhaps a sales driven lens to healthcare. So what we really do is apply and enrich that data with context, clinical context that helps make sense. So for example, what is a disease severity like? How has a patient progressed in his or her treatment? journey. What kind of therapies were they on? Like, and especially now with specialty medication, there's a lot of complex therapy and treatment patterns out there. So, which of those are really working for that patient in a real world setting? What's not working? How long do they have to stay on treatment to make it work, etc.? So, I think that's really the kind of personalized patient level insight that we provide using patient data. That's what our technology is based on. It's a think simply put, our technology has this ability to process massive amount of information. It has the clinical smarts to create meaning out of that massive amount of information. And then it has the ability to present it to audiences to make meaningful insights and decisions out of that. So that's a very simple explanation, Philip, of
Right.
what we do
Yeah.
through our technology.
So Japan is, I guess, like a lot of countries, quite complex in, the healthcare system. What are the differences or what are the learnings that you've sort of experienced, with Prospection while working in Japan?
Sure. It's definitely, as a global company at Prospection, it's definitely very advantageous to see the different healthcare systems and the inherent quirks and nuances of those healthcare systems. So we started in Australia, where we have a single payer system, have perfect longitudinal data. That comes with its own set of advantages in the fact that you really know what is happening to the patient at every stage of his or her journey. So that's fantastic. But sometimes it's slightly limiting in Australia because we don't get certain kind of information. US is the other extreme. You have a lot of data, but it's highly fragmented because the healthcare system is complex. There are multiple payers, multiple healthcare providers, etc. But what US has done well is they have learned how to link data. So they've realized there's no one perfect data that exists out there. So how can we link data to make it more clinically relevant and clinically rich? So that's been a characteristic of the US. Now, Japan is interesting because it does have one of the richest data sets in terms of hospital data, claims data, etc. But a lot of times the clinical nuances are sometimes missing in those claims data. So what I mean by that is you can know the medication, etc., but the richness of what kind of genetic mutation happened that led to this kind of treatment, what kind of disease severity existed that prompted a doctor to escalate the treatment to a different medication. Those nuances are sometimes a little bit of a gap in Japanese healthcare data, which has been in some ways the focus for us in Japan, which is how can you use that, apply our ability to enrich that data set. First, we used to use traditional, we started off by having clinicians on board who would tell us how to interpret that data.
Mm.
So a lot of doctors telling us, oh, this is happening, this is what it means. Then leveraging that to develop our own data science and machine learning capabilities. And now we're starting to develop AI capabilities that help enrich that information with more clinically relevant facts that are quite useful. So that's actually been a very specific nuance to Japan in the absence of a perfect longitudinal data or the ability to link multiple data sources together.
Mm. And how are the companies here? I mean, whether they be Japanese multinationals or American or European multinationals, how are they embracing sort of AI? I guess not only with Prospection, just kind of in the broader scope.
I think that's a very interesting question, and I feel the last couple of years, maybe year and a half, has been quite there's been shift. So
Yeah.
maybe I'll talk about two observations. The first is there's definitely a shift in terms of the mood shifting from curiosity to action. Everyone realizes that it's not just something that you talk about, but something that you need to do something about. And as regulatory and commercial pressures have increased, there's stronger appetite for these kind of tools that help generate real world insights to either help focus on particular patient segments, optimize launch strategies, or go for guided evidence generation. So there's definitely that shift there. I think the second key observation is Japanese pharma companies have historically been incredibly thoughtful adopters of technology. So what I mean by that is
Mm.
genuine interest in AI, but there's a preference for a certain rigor over the hype. So AI
Right.
adoption in Japan, I would say, is not necessarily driven by how novel the solution is, or speed as such. There is a lot of focus on precision, transparency, and clinical credibility. And that's what we get asked on as well. Like, tell me, what's your precision like? Tell me, how are you able to explain this? How does it make sense in the context of clinical guidelines? So there's a lot of focus on that, which is, by the way, a very good thing. I think, you know, as a practitioner in the AI space, there's a term called explainable AI used a lot. It's more used in the context of a technical construct of how you define solutions. But I believe explainable AI is a key requirement for AI adoption to have a certain scale, particularly in Japan. So how explainable can we make our AI solutions and not make it black box will determine how rapidly and how much AI gets adopted.
Right. Yeah. No, that's a good point about the black box. That's certainly been some criticism of some other companies in sort of the digital space, and that the clients quite like the product, but they have no idea sort of what's, kind of
Right.
what's going on, and they feel really frustrated.
Right.
So it sounds like Japan's not necessarily early adopters, and that they have a sense of rigor in terms of really understanding the technology before sort of diving in.
Say so. I would say so, and I don't think that that's necessarily a bad thing. I do
Mm.
think that there are certain
Yeah.
set of innovators out there, in the sense that what I like, what I think is the right approach is, you need to experiment. You definitely need to experiment. And I can definitely see quite a few companies willing to experiment in the space of AI, which I think is a fantastic framework. So you'll have those experimenters, but before the widespread adoption happens, I think the credibility and rigor on these applications will be a prerequisite before you see mass adoption. So that's definitely a trend.
So where do you see kind of prospection and sort of AI in general in Japan in the next, I don't know, it's moving so quickly, it's difficult to look too far ahead, but if you have your crystal ball for the next sort of 3 to 5 years.
I think it'll be, so generally what I see happening in Japan is there is a big focus and surge of investment, and companies therefore that are they're making data be available more and more readily. So richer data, more data. So there's a lot of space in that, especially around patient data. So that trend's already there, and even in the last year, there's been a significant shift in just the sheer amount of data providers out there that bringing in new and rich data. Once prospection, one of the things that we have always focused on, we believe to be true, especially in a fragmented market, is there's no one size fits all data set that's going to exist. So you have to leverage multiple sources to create a solution that works. I think there's going to be a, a need for real examples to be created, real success stories to be created in the next year, definitely. And there are a lot of companies playing a big part in that. Prospection is also a company that's, and hopefully with some of the partnerships we have ongoing with academia and etc., we will have some real stories to talk about. One of the reasons why I think academia plays a big role in this AI adoption is from a clinical credibility perspective as well. So you can have AI solutions, but when you have academia, also adding weight to those AI solutions, that will play a big part. So you'll see a bit of that happening, and we're definitely collaborating quite extensively with academia on that front. And once that happens, you will see the vast majority of companies adopt it at scale. There are already quite a few companies who have started their journey and are quite advanced in that space, but it'll take the next 3 to 4 years. We'll see a surge of data providers, we'll see a surge of AI providers. Then there'll be some kind of a subset of those who will deliver real tangible value and impact and
Yeah.
success stories, and then you will see a massive adoption. So I think that's what the
Yeah.
trend's going to look like. I feel like with most technologies.
Right.
So I'm really excited about this space and what we can do, particularly in Japan.
And to the candidates out there thinking about sort of a career change and looking at prospection as we talk to them, what's kind of exciting for candidates to consider prospection?
Sure. I mean, I would say if someone's healthcare is a very personal industry. Like, a lot of people
Yeah.
who work in healthcare do it because they want to make a real impact in people's lives. So if you're someone who really wants to shape that future of healthcare in Japan and globally, and you want to thrive in a place that brings in global innovation but with deep local roots, prospection is the place to be. Also, at Prospection Japan, I'd still say, even we've had a good 5 years and we're working with quite a few brands, but we're still building. Which means that if you have the ability to shape the business and not just execute, you'll work with global experts from around the world, but you will have the autonomy to localize, to lead, and to influence internally and externally. So I think we are a group that values people with curiosity, collaboration, and courage. If you want to build with purpose and enjoy the ride together, I feel Prospection's a great place to do that.
Tell us more about courage. That's interesting. Yeah, expand on that.
Courage is, as a company that's trying to bring about change, any company for that matter, you need to have a degree of courage, because you're trying to push something that's perhaps not the norm. And I think that particularly in healthcare, it's an ambitious, it's a highly critical, very very critical industry in general, but also a industry that is, and for all the right reasons, very particular on things that you can and cannot do. Um, I think we will as a to drive innovation in healthcare, you will need to be courageous, because you'll often hear more no's than yeses.
Mm.
It's true for most industries, but particularly in healthcare.
Well, when
So
something's
at that
new, yeah.
yeah, at that time, I think courage and grit is perhaps the two things that you need to just keep pursuing the belief, and hopefully at some time the doors open. So I definitely say, a startup in healthcare, courage and grit would be two very important characteristics for candidates to have while joining a business.
All right. Thanks, Vishal. That's a good spot to end. Have courage, be brave, and yeah, move forward. So thanks so much for spending a little bit of time with us today, and
Thank you.
enjoy your upcoming break. And we're
I'm
looking
looking
forward
forward to it.
for you to meet lots of our candidates real soon.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for the opportunity to kind of share this. Also, it's also a medium for us to reach out to candidates who,
Yeah, that's right.
and like I said, building talent locally is a key focus of ours. So I'm really glad to have the opportunity to be able to convey Prospection and Prospection Japan's plans, and we look forward to talking to a lot more candidates in the coming few months.
Great, Vishal. We'll talk soon.
Thank
Bye
you.
bye.